Hi, my name is Dr. Tova Fuller. I am Vice President of San Francisco Bay PSR, and I'm joined with the President of San Francisco Bay PSR, Dr. Bob Gould. Uh, Thank you so much for participating. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born in the Bronx, went to Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and I mention that as much because I was so fortunate to have as my community medicine professor, Dr. Victor Seidel, who is one of the founding members of Physicians for Social Responsibility, who was fresh from his being on the first medical delegation to China that accompanied the opening up of China after years of very strong antagonism between our country and the People's Republic of China. And Vic was a major influence on me, a real mentor, and later on worked with him very closely within the American Public Health Association, through my own work as often chairperson of the American Public Health Association Peace Caucus on advancing nuclear weapons issues and related anti-militarism policies through the American Public Health Association. Vic was also a president of APHA around the time I reconnected with him around that work. And for further background information, I moved out to California in 1977 to start my pathology residency. And after that, in 1981, I joined San Jose Kaiser and worked as a pathologist there until 2012, after which my retirement from there, I joined the program on reproductive health and the environment at UCSF, where I'm an associate adjunct professor within the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and through that have tried to advance PSR's work on environmental health, and as well to squeeze in nuclear weapons and militarism issues as they connect into that work as well.
Thank you. You actually answered some of the questions I was going to ask you next.
Okay.
But I might ask one of them anyway. So here's a very important question. Do you actually know anything at all about nuclear weapons?
Yeah, I've followed nuclear weapons. If I go back to the Bronx days, from the time that I went to the Allerton Theater at 12 years old and saw Dr. Strangelove, and I think somewhere around that time also saw Failsafe. So those left an indelible impression upon me about how horrible nuclear weapons is on the one hand, and in terms of Dr. Strangelove, sort of fortified me with the black humor to be able to sustain myself all these years as we're approaching, as we've approached 75 years after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A lot of that stuff, honestly, connected with other issues that were very much on my mind when I was about 12 years old. Certainly, I was very influenced by my own family experience in terms of losing half my family in the Holocaust to the Nazis, and many of my family members came from Poland, where that happened to them, and as well very informed by the evolving civil rights movement through the 50s and 60s when I was a kid, and then soon after seeing Dr. Strangelove, for me, the horrible wars that we were propagating on the Vietnamese people and the rest of folks living in Southeast Asia. So all of that pulled together for me in terms of forming a great deal of my political sensibilities that for me, I felt I needed to speak out from the time I was in elementary school about that stuff.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. And given that, what is your favorite fact about nuclear weapons?
My favorite facts about nuclear weapons. Gee, Tova, that's a tough one. It's not a favorite fact, but I guess, but we have over 13,000 nuclear warheads, close to 13,410 nuclear warheads in the world today, which, although reduced from a high point of about 70,000 odd weapons decades ago, still are too many for our world to contemplate having.
It's a good fact. Okay, another question. You're the president of a local chapter of National PSR. You're also a National PSR board member and have been for years and years. So I think this is an ideal question for you. Most people think of nuclear weapons as a national, federal, and international issue. So what is the relevance of a local chapter, and specifically San Francisco, to nuclear weapons and that issue?
Well, you know, nuclear weapons affect all of us. So certainly from the standpoint of a local chapter, we want to organize and do the best to support the allies in our community on the fight to abolish nuclear weapons, and as well to fight against the impacts of our very deadly foreign and military policy, within which those nuclear weapons are a very strong part of this. So we work locally with partners. Notable among them would be Western States Legal Foundation. Dear friend and colleague Jackie Cabasso leads that, and has herself also had a great deal of impact on the international arena, working with Mayors for Peace and bringing nuclear weapons issues to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which is a way that we connect the global impacts and certainly with the budgetary impacts of nuclear weapons in the military budget. Our other counterpart is Marilia Kelly, who heads Tri-Valley Communities Against a Radioactive Environment, which is particularly focused on the nuclear weapons work in our local Department of Energy facility, the Livermore National Lab, which is a part of the brain trust to develop nuclear weapons. This is only 50 miles or so from my home in San Francisco, and it's represented a locus of our organizing activities, which have included the annual demonstrations and associated nonviolent civil disobedience that many participants take part in on Hiroshima Day activities every year. And illustrative of that, and Tova, you also participated in this as well, we just commemorated the 75th anniversary of the bombings that in Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed over 210,000 human beings by the end of 1945, and have left the radioactive legacy for us all to see in terms of the downward impacts of genetic abnormalities, reproductive health effects, and cancers. And of course, opening up the nuclear weapons era, which has led to so much disease among people who have been downwind from the explosions, not only in the United States, but in places like the Marshall Islands, who've suffered from this. And of course, the basic existential question of these weapons could cause us all to perish in a moment.
Yeah, so how does this relate to you being a doctor?
Well, I went into medicine wanting to serve people and to promote good health among people. So the connection was very obvious that these weapons could kill us all and lead to such dread health impacts, that I wanted to do my utmost to operate both within the medical field and outside of it in the political arena, basically having taken to heart the lesson that our founding members put out in the New England Journal of Medicine series in 1962, that there was no way that we could really contemplate being able to deal with what the likely morbidity and mortality of a nuclear conflict would bring. With that series of reports in 1962, having explored what the impacts would be from a thermonuclear exchange between the United States and the then Soviet Union. that data indicated that we would have onwards of 90% of doctors and nurses who would die. We would not have enough burn beds, all the things that we could take care of people. And for us, it elevated as essential ethical and moral compass for us that we had to do anything we could to prevent such a thing from happening, and if need be, break out of the traditional mode of physicians to treat disease. I was certainly taught in medical school, but I was also taught by people like Dr. Seidel that you had to step out of that comfortable mode and do anything that you could to prevent such a thing from happening, in line with public health principles, in line with preventative health principles. So that's where I've seen the connections for me personally to carry out that work, and equivalently for work that I and we in PSR do on the other of the twin existential threats that we face, global warming.
So along the lines of something you said, I think 2 sentences back, who is your favorite nuclear abolitionist and why?
My favorite nuclear abolitionist, well, you know, in terms of the 2 people who have influenced my own thinking in that way, Victor Seidel, who passed away 2 years ago, and another founding member of PSR, Jack Geiger, who's also been an incredible influence in terms of his longstanding commitment to social justice, evinced by his founding of Physicians for Human Rights, and as well famously captured in when he was setting up the Freedom Health Clinics in Mississippi in 1964, where he famously wrote on a prescription pad, "food," because of the hunger and poverty that many of the largely African-American people in Mississippi face on a daily basis and still face on a daily basis. So those influences that incorporate their work on nuclear abolition, but so much more, has really been influential for me personally.
Okay. So you've worked on this for decades, clearly an expert on the issue. What do you think is the one most important thing that we can do going forward to prevent nuclear war?
Well, always have a difficulty with the one thing to do. Certainly we have a central program within PSR now that we work with many other organizations. The Back from the Brink program, which has a multi-tiered program to reduce nuclear dangers that include taking nuclear weapons off of alert status, not having the sole authority of a president like our current president to fire off the weapons, that don't have first use of nuclear weapons, that, and very important, to stop the modernization program that would cost anywhere from 1.2 to $2 trillion over the next 30 years, which is like $4 to $6 million every hour. And also to pursue a path speedily towards the abolition of nuclear weapons, either through a nuclear weapons convention or the alternative path that we've been working on with the International Coalition Against Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, which is to support the treaty to ban nuclear weapons. Now, having said that, and being fully committed to that program that we're working on here in the San Francisco Bay Area, like many other of our chapters around the country, I honestly think that the road to nuclear weapon abolition is more likely to be, if you will, indirectly, being incorporated very organically into a broader social movement for change. If we want to call it revolution, we can call it that, but much more widespread social change, whereby these issues interconnect with issues of global warming, connect with broader issues of environmental and social justice that are evinced by the Black Lives Matter movement and other broad movements. I would see the defunding that's being picked up by, say, Black Lives Matter and other groups right now around police repression, to me extends to defunding these dread weapons of mass destruction that ultimately, as our own foreign policy experts have said, in their grand schema of escalation dominance, represent the ultimate level of violence when all others have been explored. So I think we need that type of transformation. And I honestly can't see that happening just on nuclear weapons in isolation from the other things. I say that with still full commitment that somebody needs to be speaking out on nuclear weapons when they're often not uh, understood or appreciated, often by younger members in our movement who, unlike myself, didn't grow up in the shadow of the bomb being so visible, whether by mass culture or just being part of the movement at the time. But I think it's our real responsibility on PSR to both pursue the anti-nuclear weapons issues and move towards abolition on their own reasons as much as we can, but I think we as much need to link that movement with the broader movements for it ever to have a chance of really leveraging the power to make that happen. And it has to be rooted in social justice worldwide. I mean, and it has to deal with the entire life cycle of these weapons, which have everything to do with who's mining the uranium, who's making the weapons, what are the legacy issues of environmental destruction that Marshallese are facing every day as their entire civilization has been destroyed by the bombings and left with radioactive legacy. We have so much to clean up in just 75 years of the nuclear era that we need to be real with people and bring people together who have far less resources than we in the United States to tackle these issues.
Well said, yes. So my last question for you is, do you have any comments for younger generations, specifically millennials, about the need to engage in nuclear weapons activism?
Yeah, well, I think in line with what I was saying in the other direction, our need to link nuclear weapons with the broader issues, I think it's very important for younger people to engage these issues because they are, and their own future generations, our future generations, are just as much under the nuclear gun in terms of what those impacts are. And I think that it's an integral part of linking our struggles. I think nuclear weapons and the militarism that encompasses it is a major threat to being able to gain significantly on the issues that are mobilizing younger people, whether they be climate change, whether they be other related issues of environmental degradation, whether they be issues of police violence and social justice and institutionalized racism. We need an integrated movement. And, in that regard, as we're all trying to pull together to build a Green New Deal in our country, to really leverage all the communities that need support in building a new society, that's from providing the good jobs that are involved with environmental restoration and dealing with our climate crisis, and having those be the central portion of our economy, we have real revenue needs to be able to fund those types of programs and make the economic transformation. We in PSR, and I could certainly speak to our work in the American Public Health Association within the Peace Caucus, have long stressed what these trade-offs are that we need to address. And 30 years ago, I was working with Vic Seidel at APHA on issues of economic conversion. How are we going to change the military-industrial complex hold over our economy, whereby every congressional district in the country has a military project, which then makes people have this false choice between good jobs and building the stuff that destroys our planet many times over. And I think we're facing that now. We need to have the money. And when we're talking about $4 to $6 million an hour on building nuclear weapons over the next 30 years, or the rest of the trade-offs of the overall military budget clocking in at $750 billion every year, and that's not including warfare operations, that's where we need to begin to leverage those resources to serve our common human needs. So I can't see in both directions anything being successful unless all of these issues are taken on, including by younger people as being necessary for building the movement we need.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the work you do.
Well, you too, Tova. I mean, it's all of us working together, right? So thank you for the opportunity to do my little cut here in mass and modern media.
Great. See you on Instagram.
Okay, I guess so. Bye-bye.